Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I'm your host, Erin Jane. And today I am joined by Josh Bailey, who I just found out this is his first podcast, which is very much a privilege to have him on today, because Josh is someone who has led a life consisting of service in multiple capacities. He's a former police officer and Australian Defence Force veteran. He's had a combined service of 18 years in the Australian Army, including joining the reserves as a 17-year-old. And he served as a member of the 1st Commando Regiment, which is the Reserve Special Forces. After his reserve service, Josh joined a couple of law enforcement roles, one with the Australian Protective Services, where he performed an air marshal role, and with the Australian Federal Police, where he was in the general duties and emergency dispatches positions. So his career in law enforcement was 9 years in total, and he left the AFP after a PTSD diagnosis in 2009, which followed on from an on-duty motor vehicle accident. Josh returned to the Army Reserves before joining the regular Australian Defence Force as a fitter and turner in 2010, and he was medically discharged in 2020. Since then, he's joined the Disaster Relief Australia, which is a veteran-focused volunteer disaster recovery organisation, where he's had over 5 deployments for floods, cyclones, and other emergencies and natural disasters, which has followed on from similar such deployments that he had in the Army. He's currently a provisional psychologist as he completes his Masters of Professional Practice in Psychology. So after all of that mouthful, Josh, thanks for being here.
Wow, thanks for the intro. Thanks for having me. Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time. And obviously, as a fellow Australian, I appreciate being able to chat to a fellow Aussie and share in our lovely accent.
Yeah, happy to help you out. Yeah, awesome.
So Josh and I connected on Instagram. And we've sort of just, had a bit of banter back and forward for sort of the last few months until we decided to have this chat. So I would love to sort of dive on in, Josh, and have you tell me what prompted you to join the reserves as a 17-year-old?
Yeah, good question. So I actually grew up with my grandparents.
Okay.
And so I moved in with them in 1984, and my grandfather I was born in 76.
Okay.
Moved in with them in 84. And my grandfather was captain of the local volunteer fire brigade, the Valley Heights Volunteer Fire Brigade, which is just up in the Blue Mountains there, Lower Blue Mountain.
Oh, nice.
And he'd been there for like 30-something years. So he'd lost his house in the 1954 bushfires. And it went right through and took the whole lot. And so he went, I'm off this, joined the Fireys, and him and another guy called Phil Coperberg, and anyone who's Australian would know that he ended up being a politician. But they ended up running he was with Mallee and Gramps was Valley Heights. So he had a lifetime of service through that. And then back in those days, I guess if you would call these days able-bodied and could actually help out the community, then you would join. So I joined the reserves. Back then, so kind of the recession we had to have, jobs were hard to come by. So I got into the reserves pretty easy, and then, it went from there. Yeah.
Okay.
That was it.
And so what was the training like, or the expectations as being a reservist in the Australian Army?
Back in 94, we were still training for Vietnam. So,
wow.
Yeah. So it was a lot of rope climbing because you might have to climb to get out of a jungle. We still use I was trained on the M16, the SLR, the Steyr, still the M79, the M60, all those sort of Vietnam era weapons. We still have the M79, and so we can fit the Illume round in it because it's longer. It's a different story, but we still got that weapon. We still got 66, but
yeah,
that's what we were training for back then, Vietnam. So I went to Canungra, which is a land warfare training school. We've got 2 in Australia, and that was all jungle, and all the stories there were back from Vietnam. It was all the NAM. We still had Vietnam vets in the army, which was only 20-something years, 22 years prior, really. So Vietnam, when I first joined, Vietnam is closer than what East Timor is to now. East Timor 99, we're now 2024.
Yeah.
Vietnam finished in 72. I joined in 94. So we're still training for Vietnam. And then I ended up joining the 1st Commando Regiment, which were basically what we call in Australia chocos, reserves. And I got accepted and got my beret, got my green beret. But I kind of want to make the point here, and this is rare, but it's the reason why one of the contributing factors to become a psychologist. And the point is, I'm happy that I passed. I did all the hard shit to get in, and I wore the beret with pride. But any dude who spent time in, any of the Western SOCOM or SF units would tell you that it's harder to keep your position than what it is to actually obtain it. So what I mean by that is I got in, and everyone gets in, and off they go to their jobs. I wasn't really good in the water, and I wasn't really good at heights either. So if you're not good at what they call a vertical environment, or if you're not good at parachuting, or if you're not good in the water, you're not going to be good as an SF operator. So I was horrible in the water. My very first deployment out of an aircraft was what's called an intentional water descent. So I've exited the back of the aircraft. My landing obviously wasn't as good as it could be. It had risers around my neck. So you got the parachute here.
Yeah.
The riser connects to the actual canopy. And that was around my neck as I bobbed out of the water. We have Zodiacs that come and get you. They're little inflatable craft. They come and get you as a dude driving it. Yeah. And this dude reaches in. I could just remember his bicep. And he's grabbed me to pull me out of the water. And I started choking because the riser was held onto the canopy, which was filled with water. So it was pulling me down. And he let me go. And then I started drowning. So I was drowning, choking, drowning, choking. In the end, they got a knife, cut the risers, pulled me up. And then out of all of that, I ended up tearing a muscle from my hip extender or something because I had to put my leg up onto the pontoon for them to pull me in.
Yeah.
Which I still have, sort of this day. So my first ever water descent, that was it. I never really recovered in the water from then. And then back in those days, that was 99, so that was a Friday. And then in the end, they're like, don't tell anyone because they'll might shut the course down because it's considered an incident. Like a near miss parachuting is a fucking big deal.
Yeah.
Back then, 99, it was like fucking off you go. And then I went and jumped again. I think on the Monday, we all went and jumped again because it was on the course. But I never, and I'm really disappointed with myself for this. I think that's part of the problem with veterans emergency services is their disappointment with how their mind reacts around trauma, which they can't control. Yeah. So I'm really disappointed that, one, I wasn't as good as I could be in Special Forces. I'm going to say SF for you guys, but in Australia, it's called SOCOM. I just wasn't as good a commando as what I'd hoped. I wasn't very suited. And that's just the truth, unfortunately. Which leads to my next point just quickly. The thing about PTSD, if you recover, you really like the truth because you don't have to remember anything. And you have to be really honest with yourself. Otherwise, you're just not going to recover. Yeah. So that's that. So that was my time really in the unit. Disappointed, but that's just the hard and the fast. Which led me to go on to other things like join the Australian Protective Service and then my time obviously in the ASOs or the Air Marshals and then, the rest is history. But that's... Yeah. The Chocos was hard. I got to do some cool courses. But that was just the Australian way of life back then. You join the reserves. It's that was just the way it was. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to explain to any Americans listening what Chocos means, like where it stems from?
Oh, Chocos, yep. So you melt in the sun. Chocolate soldiers melt in the sun. Yeah. I didn't make up that term. That's just Chocos.
No, I mean that dates back to I mean, at least World War II.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yep.
I remember seeing something about it back then. But yes, Aussies give each other weird names.
Yeah.
Overall, I think.
The way it is. Yeah.
Exactly. But so, that, like you're saying, it would have been challenging feeling like, that disappointment stemming from that time in the reserves. How long were you in the reserves before you jumped over to some of your law enforcement experience with the protective services?
I did 6 solid years in the reserve. So commandos is not like a normal choco unit. You can do as much time as they allow you, really.
Okay.
It's not a conventional 1 weekend a month, 2 days a year, two
Yeah.
weeks a year. It's fucking constant.
Okay. So
And a
did
lot
you
of
have
guys,
like other work
I
at
did
the same
full-time
time?
service as well. There was
Okay.
a small full-time service role, but I think that and my drinking as well probably didn't really help much. I was a bit of a pisshead.
Which
So
wouldn't be
because it was
part
at
of the
Provisional, like being
Australian Army
invincible.
culture at all.
Yeah, and I probably took it a bit too far. But and then I joined the protective service.
Okay.
And then September 11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Air Marshal program, because John Howard was the Prime Minister, and then the Air Marshal program kicked off, and I was on the first ever course. There was 16 of us. Yeah.
Okay. So explain what exactly was like the Australian Protective Service when you joined, and then sort of what did it, I guess, like migrate into post 9/11, like you're saying?
That's a great question. So originally it was basically, I guess, the government's security guarding sort of agency, I guess.
So
And I
like kind
originally
of a weird version of like a secret service type of thing, like to protect like politicians and stuff like that, or no?
No. So the AFP did what's called plain clothes stuff. So they did CPP and they did WITSEC as well. Protective service was uniformed,
Okay.
except for ASO, the Air Security Officer Program, which is what you would call air marshals. We were plain clothes,
Mm-hmm.
obviously for obvious reasons. But the APS would do sort of, I guess it was like general duties policing without the powers, really, at airports. So we'd respond to something, and then we'd go,
Yeah.
we better call the state police, and then they'd show up. Like, it was a bit convoluted. So now in Australia, you see actual real police there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that was a cool job. I sort of trying to find my way in life. I was an apprentice, but it didn't. I got to 4th year and then I lost my job, budget cuts or whatever. And then, so I was trying to find my way, really.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up there, and then the Air Marshals program kicked off after September 11. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I was on night shift, so I saw it happen on the TV. Yeah.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. Saw the plane go into the second towers. Yeah. It was about midnight Sydney time.
I remember the same thing. I was up watching The West Wing.
Oh,
And
okay.
and it was on Channel 9, and it cut like a news break when there shouldn't have been a news break.
Yep.
And the last time I remember that happening was when Princess Diana died. And so my blood would always just fucking like freeze when I would hear that like interrupted news break bulletin music, and I'm like, oh fuck, what now? And I was up watching it with my mum, and we were like, this can't have been an accident. And then we watched the second plane hit live, and it was just
Yeah, we it was really I had never thought that in Australia we actually thought that New York would have had like missile batteries and stuff to shoot down any planes. That was the feeling that was. We were like, hang on, doesn't the Americans have bloody Patriot missiles ready to go type thing? We were all very shocked. Like an Iron Dome type setup. So we were all pretty shocked about that. And then November the same year, we went down to Canberra, 16 of us, and there's actually 20 of us, and 16 of us passed, first ever course,
Okay. Yep. And so then what specifically then did like the air marshals do? Was that the airport security thing?
Yeah, so back then, back then, so it's 2002, we were basically counter-terrorism role. It wasn't law enforcement. It was strictly CT. So essentially, you would fly up near the cockpit, which they call the point of domination. I don't know if they still do. To stop. The idea was to stop the plane being hijacked.
Yeah.
So a comparison in Australia. So if someone beats up a flight attendant, then the air marshal's not supposed to step in. If someone knocks on the captain's fucking door, then the ASO gets up and steps in. The difference between CT and normal policing.
Yeah.
Fortunately, flights are fairly tame in Australia, so we don't really have that sort of situation. But that was how I was explaining it. And we carried first ever flights. We carried 40 caliber H&K pistols. So they're like 10.4 millimeter hollow points they got from America. They sent them over. And 10.4 caliber hollow points. So you can imagine shooting something like those.
And especially on a freaking plane. I mean, fuck. Wouldn't want to miss.
Oh, yeah. And then they said, here's a baton. So once you extend the baton, it'd go from like here to there, and that'd be it. And the idea of that was to say you could have another use of force option. And then I carried 46 rounds, three magazines of 15 and one on the spout, 46. Oof. So you'd have someone else, they had 90 rounds between you.
So fair to say that like after 9/11, it wasn't just in America, like kind of everyone all over the world like lost their minds in terms of like security options.
Yeah, that New Zealand had them. Singapore has them. Who else? Singapore. The boys flew to the United States, Great Britain. Countries like Sri Lanka have them as well. Okay. So the way it works is Australia won't fly to another country because you're in with air marshals because you're importing weapons from another country.
Yeah.
Another country is bringing in weapons, so therefore you have to have a cooperative MOE with that country. So if we fly there, they fly here. And the other thing too, so for example, if you're flying from Sydney to Hawaii, you need to have a memorandum of understanding with 13 other countries. Because if you land...
because you go over their airspace.
They need to understand that two dudes are going to cruise in with guns.
Right.
So it's a lot more technical.
Makes sense. Then like you can imagine.
I flew in PNG without weapons. It was only a couple of flights without guns. And it was shit because we were white and everyone's looking at us and we were like shit scared. We weren't really up the front either. It was a shit gig because it wasn't very well thought out. And we were like, what the fuck? And that was pretty dodgy. That was back in May 2002. I remember that. But it was in Australia. If things are happening terrorism-wise constantly on a plane, then something's gone wrong. So it was a fairly mundane sort of job. It wasn't always excitement like the movies. It's not like Passenger 57, But there was one
Wesley.
time.
That was a good movie.
There was one time that shit got real, but that was about it. Yeah. Yep.
Do we get to hear about when shit got real? Or is that classified, Josh?
So the thing about this, right, what I didn't get was after we told people was the response of, don't worry about it, mate. She'll be right. Don't tell anyone. Fucking don't record it. I'm like, what the fuck? Anyway, so we're flying from Brisbane. This guy, Jared, and I were flying because we had pairs. And it was a 767-300. And I have a 1A, 2B set up in business class. We're flying in business class. And so 1A was like a business class seat by itself, aisle, and two seats. And so old mate JK from Jamiroquai gets on the plane and he's got his keyboard player there as well. This other guy got on with a keyboard and this other dude got on. And what Qantas did back then, I don't know if they still do in business class, they play music on their screens. And so one of the music that they were playing as you were getting on the plane was Jamiroquai. He released a song. Stiller, This Ain't Love was another song. Murder on the Dance Floor was another one. And he was playing this song. And he gets on. And he's got this fucking hat. And I'm like, who's this fucking... Anyway, he gets on. And then it's the coat holder thing, and then there's seat 1B. And then in between there, you can have the flight attendants walk through and do their thing. And back then there was a TV screen there.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's looking at me. He's doing these ones, and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? I'm looking at him. I'm like, fuck, that's him. Holy shit!
Oh my God! So what? He was on the screen.
Yeah. So up until then, the only thing you would see on planes was like commentators, sports commentators, maybe some news personalities. You wouldn't always see personality. It was rare, you know. And then in the end, fucking here's JK there, and I'm like, I don't know your name, mate, but anyway. And he's looking around, and he gets up, and he's fucking like comes towards me, and I've gone, and so once the aircraft door is closed, that means the plane is then in flight. So under the Crimes Aviation Act, the plane is deemed to be flying for the whole thing, right? So therefore, the federal legislation takes over. So if he's approaching me and I'm the air marshal, well, fucking righto, that I'm covered by law type thing. So I've gone like this, ready to fucking go, because we carried our weapon there underneath because we're plain clothes, and I was ready to give it this guy. Anyway, this flight attendant just walks over and goes, "Excuse me, sir, would you mind sitting?" Just casually sits down. And then he's doing these ones and shit. I look behind, Jared's over there, and he's like trying to remain anonymous, and I'm like, fucking. And then
was he like having a crack? Did he say something? Or it's just like his body language was just like aggressive?
Because the music was crapping on and people were loading stuff.
Yeah.
And then in the end, the flight attendant gave him some food, like, calm the fuck down. And then I looked, because back then you could have Carlton Crownies, which were glass bottles, and you could also have steel cutlery. So you've got weapons there, and that was our concern. You've already got weapons on the plane because you get a glass bottle and you can just fucking glass someone.
Yeah.
So then they've had a conversation, the flight attendant and the cabin crew dude who's running it. They took that away. He moved seats. And then the guy with the keyboard, the black guy with the keyboard, changed seats. And then he fucked off down the back somewhere, still in business class behind me. Yeah. And then when we went and told the boss, he was like, "Oh, don't worry about it, mate. Don't tell anyone. She'll be right." So I've reached for my fucking weapon, and they're like, "You'll be right, mate. Don't worry about it." Because back then, there wasn't a great amount of legislative framework to cover air marshals. It wasn't very popular. Because of all the greenies. And back then they had remember the Democratic Party with Natasha Stott-Despoja?
Oh, I do remember that, yeah.
They were the old school greenies, and she was whinging and bitching and carrying on. And so that got a bit of traction.
The
APS was like, "Hey, man, fucking calm it down. Don't tell anyone." Yeah,
keep it on the down low. Well, there you go. The bloke from Jamiroquai having a crack.
Yeah, I still don't. I don't like his music. Like, if I hear his music, he behaves just like real life. He was just, there was no difference. Doing these ones and shit.
So what you're saying is when I release this podcast episode, do not put Jamiroquai next to your photo.
With that top hat on or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
I couldn't believe it. I was just sitting there.
Now I'm fucking tempted, mate.
And then he just come towards me. Yeah. Fuck, whatever.
Oh,
but that's
a bit random.
That's probably the only cool story I have. The other one I had was, and this wasn't very well reported, and admittedly, I don't know if we even got on the right plane. I honestly don't know. But information back in 2002 used to come via email, and then when we would sign anything that was secret, it would be, those old folders you'd get, and then you'd have to sign to say you've received information because it was need to know principle. And you'd sign.
Okay, yeah.
Well, this email came through and that ASIO had told us they'd intercepted, and that was there was going to be a hijacking from Brisbane Airport on a plane to they didn't know where. So I said, "Righto, boys, off you go."
Yeah.
We get on this plane. It didn't get hijacked. Nothing happened. So we don't really know. I personally would like to come on here and say, "Yeah, look what I did." But ultimately, the plane didn't get hijacked. We got on the plane believing it was going to be hijacked.
Mm-hmm.
Just Jared and I, because that's all who was available. So I'm like, well, fucking okay. Yeah, I don't even know if I've got the right plane. So the thing about ASIO is they'll tell you something, but they won't tell you the result. They won't go, cheers, boys, or they'll word you up.
Yeah.
And then that'll be it. So we got on another Brisbane flight, actually. Got on the plane. Nothing happened. Got back, reported it, and he's like, yeah, sweet, whatever. Like, the things that were happening there weren't, the reporting mechanisms were just virtually non-existent.
Yeah. And it's hard when you're just, you've got that limited sort of amount of info to deal with.
That's cool. You've really, and I spoke to, when I got married in 2010, the guy I was in the Air Marshals program with, he was my best man, and I spoke to him about it. And he goes, oh, yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah. Kind of. So that's how much traction things actually genuinely get. Not a lot, you know. And that's pretty much it with that. Just don't play any Jamiroquai and we'll be friends. Yeah.
At least I know how to piss you off now.
Yeah.
Really fuck with you, Josh. All part of my plan. No, I wouldn't do that to you, mate. All good. And you were saying, so basically, but that role or that like organization kind of got taken or like brought into the AFP. Is that correct?
Yeah, from what I understanding, it was absorbed under what's called Project
That's the word
Merida.
I was searching
I know
for.
from Google Project Merida, but I think that's what happened. The APS got taken over by AFP, and I think a lot of them got given courses to become sworn police. Yeah, whatever. That's pretty much what happened, yeah.
So,
I went
and so
joined,
did you...
General Duties Police in 2004, though, in ACT. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you like technically left the Air Marshals and then went to...
Yeah, I left the Air Marshals and then in 2003 I got to go to the Solomon Islands with Regional Assistance Mission Solomon Islands. So a bunch of participating police forces from Oceania. So New Zealand, Tonga, PNG, Australia, Fiji, Cook Islands, which are interesting. The biggest dudes I ever saw were the Cook Islanders.
Really?
They're fucking huge. You wouldn't want to mess with them. And they're interesting. So their culture, from what I could work out, is women and men there's no differences between women and men as far as it's equal. So the equal thing has positive and negatives, including when they get on the piss and they want to fight each other. Because they're equal, male and females just go at it.
Whoa.
So that is. And quite often the women wins because the women not as strong as the blokes who is big, but they're strong and they can throw, you know. And they were so just amazingly honest. So that was interesting. But Solomon Islands, it took a while for Australia to realise that we had to go there, you know, typical. Okay. But that was all right. It was very hot though, very, very hot.
Yeah. And what was like the role that you guys were you doing, like peacekeeping? Were you helping out the population in a certain... Yeah,
so it's basically, I think it was the lower end of peace enforcement and then peacekeeping, really. And then towards the end, peace monitoring. Yeah. Okay. So when I was there in 2003, so with the second rotation, we were living in 11 by 11 tents. We were doing sort of static guarding of places and then also roaming around Honiara, different areas. We were armed. Once again, HK pistols, but they were the 9mm version this time.
Bit of a downgrade for you.
Yeah, I had a pilot ask if I was using the frangible ammunition. I'm like, yeah, sure, mate, no worries, cheers. The frangible ammunition was meant to, for some reason, impact a person and then cause harm to stop them, but it wasn't meant to go through the skin of the aircraft. I never tried it, but one guy asked the frangible ammunition, which I think is an Israeli ammunition, I'm not sure, but because you had to talk to the pilot before you got on the plane, so he knows where you're sitting.
Yeah, and who you are, and yeah,
he knows where you're sitting. That's right. Yeah, so and then one guy, because we had 3 one time. And then the pilot asked if the other guy was on work experience. Yeah. Anyway, it's pretty fun. I was like, fucking, how do I answer that? I got to fly next to the New Zealand Prime Minister, actually, Helen Clark. She was interesting. Yeah, because that was during CHOGM 2002. So that was just as when Ansett was about to go belly up.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
CHOGM meeting was once again in Brisbane, the epicenter of fucking whatever goes on. And she got on the plane with all her personal security. And there was a bit of a beef there because we carried guns and they didn't. But I just sat on the plane, it wasn't like anything exciting. I sat next to Sophie Monk one time. That was pretty cool. She was keen. She looked at me. She did the whole looked at me and she went. That was it. That was my claim to fame. I was like,
there
wow,
you
big
go.
conversation. That was it. That was as much as I got out of her. I was like, okay.
You're
Sorry.
hilarious.
Sorry, I'm not rich enough for you, Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, yeah, that was it.
It sounds like you had some fun in that role.
It
and so,
boring.
yeah. But hey, it's I think like anything, it's what you make of it, like everything we
it's cool
do.
stories. Now that you've invited me on, it gives me a chance to tell. And actually, I did more than I think, but not quite as much as I'd hoped, I guess. I don't know. But it all weighs down into the into what makes a person. That's what makes a person respond and cope with trauma, really. So everything I'm talking about really probably leads up to who I am today and what type of psychologist I'm going to be, I guess.
Yeah, very
and how I'm
much
going to
so.
help others.
Yep, that makes sense.
I always hold that I try and be as honest as I can, although a bit quirky. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. And so you were saying that you then went the AFP in 2004 and you were doing like general duties role.
Yeah, GDs. I ended up going to Woden Police Station, which is not far from the Woden Hospital, if anyone knows Canberra. Yeah, Woden Plaza, yeah. It's cold. It's freezing during the winter. Freezing.
As cold as Boston? Or, I was going to say, for Oz.
Yeah, it gets down to minus at night time. Yeah,
there you go. There you go. Yeah, so for any international people listening, Canberra is the capital of Australia and located in the ACT, the territory of the ACT. So you just did GDs for most of your time in there?
Yeah, for about 5 years, GDs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you say organisational betrayal, I certainly know how you feel. I'm going to say, and for anyone who's listening from the AFP, I'm going to say the way the AFP presents themselves is they honestly believe that Australians wake up in the morning and their first thought is, I wonder what the AFP is doing today. Like they just have this, the AFP is my life. Like, are you fucking serious, mate? Like it's an incredible persona to have to associate with. And a lot of them have degrees. They couldn't make it in their own profession, so they joined the AFP. So essentially you've just got a whole bunch of educated rejects that join the AFP and go, oh, fuck, this is real life. I'm not suited for this. How do I go to fucking services and processing or something, some cool job to get out of doing what I'm doing, Incredible. So that's the bad bit. Sorry, I do mention that I'm pretty to the point and truthful.
Right.
But I don't regret being there. I feel that I learned from the AFP that your environment consists of two things. There's your physical environment as well as the people you associate with.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can cull the people you associate with, then mentally you'll probably get better as well.
Yeah.
No such thing as toxic masculinity, just toxic people, I really feel. Yeah. And that goes for the people in the organisation as well as the people you meet. Yeah. I mean, I met Tracy, my wife, at Police Communications. It's so cold in Canberra, and I really hate the cold. And I went and did emergency dispatch there, like AAA operator. And I met Tracy there. And then we're now married. 14 years now. She probably thinks it's 30, but for me it's 14. Yeah. Yeah. There were some pretty heavy incidents there. I think some really heavy incidents.
In terms of like that, like vicarious trauma that you can get when you're dealing with that, like over the phone, you mean?
Oh, so one, well, there was two. So one, so they're public servants, right? So their whole life is governed by public servants' rules. What they will and won't do strictly governs what is governed by public service legislation. And here's an example.
Okay.
So Canberra has what's called the Brindabellas, which is like the bush, whatever the Americans call it. It's like, the bush. And there's this one bloke, he rings in 000, answer, police emergency, go ahead. This guy says, my name is pseudonym, John Smith, and I've got my employee, Dave Jones. Now, Dave's telling me that he's looking at a car and there's a person gassing themselves inside that car. I said, righto, no worries. Can you tell him to go and help? And he says, he's not required to go and help. All he's required to do is call in. Public servant such as such doesn't have to. He doesn't have to go and help. He doesn't want to. What happens if something bad happens? So I'm on the phone as this dude is watching someone die by suicide. Anyway, I've still got the tape upstairs, actually. I've still got the tape because it's recorded on tape because they can't hack it. It's just the easier way. So it's still recorded on analog tape. And I've still got it upstairs.
I mean, I'm very perplexed by that entire conversation.
A copy of that. And he was like, well, he doesn't have to, mate. He doesn't have to go and help him. He's not required by law to go and help him. He's fucking too scared. Anyway, I can't remember, I got the coordinates, but you had to get like a 10-figure, 8-figure, and then you'd get the rural dudes to go out there. They found him. It was what had happened is quite final, and the guy unfortunately passed. So that's the way it was. And I kept that tape thinking that the coroner or someone, once again, a bit like the time of the ASOs and the air marshals, no one asked, no one said anything. Hey man, what's going on? No. So I listened to that guy die. Well, vicariously, I guess. And then another time, this woman rang. And so when you answer the phone, it's full on when there's noise before you answer. Yeah. So I pick up the phone. If I can hear noise at this point here, I know it's job on, So they were screaming. This lady goes, this is what's happened. I think it was a DV situation, male inside. Knife, I think. There was yelling and stuff. She's ran outside, but she's left her daughter inside, her 6-year-old girl. So she saved herself whilst leaving a kid inside. And by this time, I think it's about 4 years, which isn't long, but it's long enough to get the shits with people. And I go, you've left your kid inside. And she goes, yes, well, don't have a go at me, blah, blah, blah. That's what the police are for, blah, blah. And this is a place called Stewart Flats. And Stewart Flats, I'm not sure if it still is, but it's one of the top 10 largest crime sort of areas in Australia. It's quite massive, that per capita sort of thing.
Is it sort of like a commission flat sort of area?
Yeah. It's all shit.
So what Americans would kind of call like project sort of area.
Yeah. I don't know, the ghetto or something.
I don't know.
Whatever, and so it was a bit sort of, and she just left the kid inside and saved herself. I can't remember what happened there. They ended up going there, but I think it turned out all right. But yeah, that was that, really.
Sounds like you take very personally, and not necessarily in a wrong way, but it like from those two examples that you just shared, it really kind of sounds like you take really to heart the fact that if someone has had the opportunity to help someone and they've chosen not to, regardless of whether it's their daughter or some random stranger potentially completing suicide.
Now that you've mentioned that, I guess that's a good explanation. I don't know why that is, but it's a very good point you've raised. I guess. I mean, there was a time when there was a fight. They were in the shop, and there's another guy called Ben Singleton, and I And he's having this conversation with the shopkeeper, and Singo's like talking to this lady, and I'm like, mate, you're married. This is fucking interesting. Should I be standing here? This is getting a bit fucking awkward. Anyway, this dude bounces through this door, and he goes, oi, oi, there's a fire. And I'm like, what? Anyway, there's dead set a fire at this Mawson Flats.
Yeah.
It's called the Wall of Shit, because it basically is. Anyway, to paint a picture, it's a 2-story 1970s brick government dwelling.
Yeah.
One ingress and egress, stairs on the way up, stairwell, and there's a big car park out the front. And for whatever reason, conveniently for me, not a lot of radio coverage. So we bounce up there. It is black as it's massively black smoke, right? Huge. And I'm like, fuck, that shit's getting real, which is rare. Normally when we turn up, it's already happened, like the fire's going off, which is also rare that the fireys aren't there. We've turned up, Singo and I got out of this car, and there's this dude out the front swinging his golf club. Hey, mate, we turned up to this guy's house a week before. We'd been in his house, and I knew that there was gas bottles in there, barbecue gas bottles.
Yeah, shit.
And we knew that he'd booby-trapped certain places of his house. And we knew that he was a subject of a negotiated surrender beforehand, So we knew that police had interacted with this dude, and I knew what was in there. And I go, hey, mate, did you light that fire? Like them? He goes, yeah, they're my bridges. I burnt them. And I'm like, okay. And he starts playing golf. I go, mate, you need to just fucking calm down. And he grabs his golf club and he starts swinging it from memory at Singo. And then we've grabbed the golf club off him. And then Singo's handcuffed him. And then, of course, you've got someone in custody in Australia. You have to stay with them. You can't just leave them by themselves. They've got to be guarded, which left me. So there's 54 units at this 2-story joint. And the thing about the flames is you could hear and see the smoke. You could hear it. And there was sort of small bangs going off. We later found out that was just the small bangs was quite loud, but they were small. Shaving cream type stuff going off.
Ah, okay.
Anyway, so I'm knocking on the door and it's daytime, but I knocked on all the doors, running around, knocking on the door, and people were coming out the front. There's no radio reception. So no one's coming to help. Yeah. So it's just Singo and I. So the dude with the golf club, he's hanging out. Singo's sort of standing there, yelling, screaming at people. Flames, black flames are going up the stairwell. It's huge. I know there's gas bottles in there. I fucking know it. And there's a dog in there as well. And I'm like, fuck, no worries. Anyway, somehow the dog got out. It was reported to me that someone had jumped the balcony at the back, grabbed the dog, and then got it out. I never met that person. Don't know. The dog got out. Cool, which is probably, that's the best thing that could happen. Turned out the bloke who owned the joint, that was his parents' place. And he did have mental health issues. But the fireys finally turn up. They skip all the chin-ups and get straight to work. And then they stand at this line and they go to put water through the windows to cool the inside down before they go bouncing in there. And I said, hey, man, there's gas bottles in there. So I just walked up normally and they've got the whole rig on, kind of like the Fallout type rig. And I'm like, hey, man. And he's sort of looking at me and he couldn't quite hear. And I told him there's gas bottles in there and the door was partially open. They cooled the outside down. The window sort of shattered a bit. And then they went. Yeah. And then when they went in, there's one gas bottle that had actually turned bright red and had blistered into an oblong shape. And the dude, he came up to me and he was shaking the fire. He goes, that's the worst I've ever seen. And he was doing these ones. Yeah. And he was like that. And he said that was ready to go. And if that had gone, depending on the capacity, it would have been, a huge fucking blast radius type thing. Because of the small flat that was in, and it would have just, and so that was that. Jesus. And so, and they found what had happened was that he'd booby-trapped all the kitchens with diesel. So as you open up the doors, diesel would come down and fall onto whoever you were. But the diesel has a very high ignition point, so you're not gonna fucking. They found like SLR magazines, and they did find HE explosive residue. There's different types of HE. I've done DEMS before, demolition courses before. I never really understood what he had in there, but it didn't go off. That once again, you could burn a stick of PE and it won't go off. Yeah. So that was that. That's an example of. Oh, and the only thing I got out of that was an email saying, "Yeah, well done, boys. Cheers, thanks." Like, not a lot
like,
of
no welfare, no nothing like that.
No, fuck no. No. The worst one I had was the car accident that I wanted to tell you about was we were driving and it was in one of the main roads in Canberra, south side in like Woden. So Phillip, I think was the suburb, or Revette. I think it was Revette. We were driving and it was the lights and sirens, what's called 305 run. And it was raining. And we were doing about 120 and 80 zone. So it's a slippery surface and the lady was driving and we went through a red light. Went to stop, check it's safe and then proceed, but that didn't happen. And I was holding onto the centre console. But back then, you didn't say anything to people because it was considered culturally rude to say, calm the fuck down. And she looked at me and she goes, we nearly had an accident then. And I was like, yeah, wait. So we come around to this red Toyota Corolla and this dude wouldn't, in Canberra, the belief is, or it was back then, I don't know if it still is, if the police are lights and sirens, they're going somewhere to take people's rights away. So they don't move for you on the roads.
Are you serious?
So they don't move for you. So this person wouldn't move.
That's terrible.
So anyway, the driver goes around to the inside, clips the gutter, and then we aquaplane. And my memory was, I'm not surprised this has happened. Anyway, we aquaplane. We hit a sign. And then there's in Canberra back then, there were concrete light poles. So like a concrete, which is handy when you hit them. Like, and in the Air Marshals program, we did emergency procedures. And so I remember seeing this pole. And so I just went like this and just braced like that. Yeah. And just waited for the hit, what seemed like an eternity. Bang, hits. And then we come to rest up against another tree. So the pole came down on the driver's side at such a velocity that the concrete burnt the driver's hand and it took off that part of the finger and I think a thumb as well.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. And it sheared the steering wheel and took the driver's side door off. And then we've come to rest forward into a pine tree and the horn was just going off like fucking mega, like massively going off. And I was like, fuck, this is not cool. The lady looks at me and she goes, I can't move. The thing I remember was white, really, really white, like behind me type white. And her eyes had changed colour. They'd changed colour. Like they'd gone from like, I can't remember what it was. Hazel to blue or blue to hazel. They changed colour. They just fucking changed colour. And anyway, I'm like, that's really, really light out there. Oh, no door. So I get the radio. Fuck, that's buggered. I kick my way out because this side of the car wasn't very good either. My radio comes off and I'm like, fuck. So I had to run to the sign at the intersection. There was an intersection of Williamson Street and Hindmarsh Drive. The problem was I hadn't remembered is we'd actually hit that sign. So I'm like, fuck, no dramas. Anyway, I'm looking at the sign and I ring 000 and I'd been going out with Tracy for exactly 1 month, like 29 days that day it was. Yeah. So she goes, hi, hon, how are you? And I go, I don't have time for that shit, Tracy. We've just fucking
shit.
So I told her what had happened. She's screaming to get people there. The fireys turn up, the ambos turn up, and I'm waving because we were like over there type thing, and I'm waving these ones, like a fucking aircraft coming in. I'm like, giving these ones. And then the fireys, they skip the warm up, no chin ups, they're just straight into it. The bloke says all uplift, and I don't know what that means, but whatever they tried to do. And then they cut the back door out, and then they reclined the seat, and then they took her away. Yeah. But I was in an unmarked car up ahead. I thought, I'll just leave his with it, and I just went and sat away. and just sort of kept it real for a bit. And then I thought I was just going to go 3 up in a car because, like, I could still work that afternoon. It was an afternoon shift. And I walked up to one of the ambos, and he goes, he just happened to say, "Where's the passenger?" And I said, "I am." And then I shouldn't have said anything because then I had to fucking get cannulated. They took me to hospital. I had to listen to Mix 106.5, which is like this old school fucking radio station. I bounce into Woden. They stick this thing around my face, and I'm getting like fucking claustrophobic. Anyway, these doctors press on my hips. This nurse comes along, doesn't even say anything, just takes my pants off. And I couldn't say anything. Like, I was going to be like, "Hey, man, you want to buy me a drink?" But he couldn't hear me. He had the thing on. Just takes off my... And then she tried to take my Altama boots. So these boots are pretty special to me. And so what they do, I don't know if you've in Australia, they just cut all your clothes off and they throw them in a bag, and then the bag just fucking goes off. So I had to go and get my boots, get my boots out. Because I'd had a few big deals with those boots, so I wanted them back, you know.
Yeah.
I still wear those boots to this day.
Really?
I've fucking still got them. Yeah. And anyway, so this is the thing, right? This is the OF thing. Superintendent rocks up and he goes, "Hey, Josh, how are you? This is at the emergency department. We're at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The person is next to me getting all the treatment. She's in a bad way. I'm probably not going to talk about too much. Easily identifiable. Let's just say car accident, 120 Ks. You can imagine this.
Jeez, I was going to ask how far is you going?
I had like in this shoulder here, inside here, there's a tear. The muscle has torn off the bone. And every time I get scans through Veteran Affairs, the dudes go, "How did that happen?" And one guy even said, "That only happens from a car accident 120 Ks an hour." And I went, "Oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, right. I'm not sure. Must be an anomaly." Like, fuck. Yeah, but that was the only... and I had, like, massive neck pains and stuff. Really couldn't get to sleep afterwards. So at 4:30 every morning back then, Police Rescue used to be on. Do you know Police Rescue?
Oh, my God, I used to love Police Rescue.
Yes. Gary Sweet and Georgia Rattray.
Yes, Georgia Rattray. No, that was her character's name, though, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, Gary Sweet.
And Steve Bastoni.
Yes.
Steve Bisley.
Yes.
Yeah, who was in Mad Max. He was in that.
Wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
oh, my God. I used to love that show.
I used to watch. Yeah. I used to get up at 4:30 every morning. I couldn't sleep. I didn't really know much about PTSD then. Back then it would have been called acute stress disorder, which means you've got PTSD symptoms within the first month. They class it, and then you get transdiagnostic, and it goes into PTSD. But, I didn't know much about that. And then the Canberra Times produced an article that said light pole cops it, none hurt. So the light pole had been hit, and the AFP said no one was hurt. And I was like, yeah, sure thing. And then I went through Freedom of Information, and they said there's no record of the car accident. ACT police have no record. And I'm like, yeah, fucking sure. So I sent back to them the news articles in the Sydney Morning Herald and said, well, here you go, mate, let me help you out. That's the sort of thing where you're talking about organisational betrayal, where they're so concerned about their own image that, you know, they'll have people die by suicide before they'll have, you know, their image tarnished. Because the people who push the organisational image are the ones who have never done anything really very serious on the street, so they wouldn't know. You know? So I'm fairly comfortable with that. But
did you ever go through the fireys department? Like, would they have had the records of it?
That's a very good point.
You know, Josh, like I used to be a detective in a former life and investigate shit.
Fuck, you're fucking right. Yeah, Conrad Barr, he was at both incidents, the fire and the car accident, I think, from memory.
There you go.
I know him only through association, but I mean, yeah.
Just something to chase up, maybe?
Yeah. Wow, we should get together more often. But that was about it. Yeah.
So did you return to work at any point, like after that car accident?
Yeah, the next day. I turned up the next day. I was like,
that sounds healthy, Josh.
And then the AFP were like, mate, what are you doing here? So Jim, who was the welfare guy, he's like, what are you doing here? Like, mate, I'm good to go. Fucking. And then so that afternoon, but they said, no dice, mate, you can't go. And then there's this lady who was like a superintendent, and she didn't even say hello. She was like, and I had to walk up to her. Just sort of looks at me. And I'm like, well, hi, how are you? I just want to let you know I'm okay. And she sort of, whatever. And then her response was, think of it from the public's point of view. How would they see a marked police car aquaplaning across the road, crashing on the way to do their job? The public would lose confidence. So, I ask you to think about how people would see that, Yeah.
What the fuck has that got to do with anything? I mean, Jesus Christ.
Well, that's the psyche of Canberra, really. That's the psyche of the AFP. It has a lot of potential. And I wish them well. They need to do well because of the way that society is. And we need a police force that tackles crime and stuff. We probably don't need the culture that is there at the moment.
And it's like I've heard, that the culture within AFP is odd. Like
very toxic. So an example I'll give you is they'll be happy if you send a well-worded email, but if you do something that's considered brave, it's like, yeah, so what? We're not really into that sort of thing. It's called
there you go.
Bravado. Bravado, yeah.
Well, not to, but as someone who worked for one of the state police forces in Australia, we were never actually quite sure what you guys did. We would see you around, but there was just like what is it that they do? We'd see you like, going to get lunch or coffee or something, and you'd like sneak away into your building, but we never knew what it was you guys did.
I'll give you an example. We had this bloke, and this he came down to general duties in Canberra because they needed people down there. And this is 2005 at the old Woden station.
Okay.
And which is like the Woden bus interchange. And they moved to the newer one back in 2005. His name was Dale. And he'd come down from Sydney. And from what I was told, he'd spent 3 years in the AFP and he'd worked on tax fraud and stuff. And that's all he'd done, this one job, because the AFP does the really big Commonwealth sort of fraud, importation, transnational crime, that sort of shit. So someone had tried to defraud the tax man, which doesn't happen every fortnight when you get your pay, of course. And so he was there for 3 years, photocopying, whatever the fuck he did. And then one day we get this phone call from a bloke. I was off duty, but a Queanbeyan police station's not far. Like we sort of interoperate on occasions. Anyway, he rings me. He goes, Josh, are you on duty? And I said, no, mate, no, I'm not. He goes, I'm on duty and we're looking for a marked AFP police car that's been stolen by a 15-year-old.
Oh.
Old mate Dale has gone, mate, you're under arrest at the Woden interchange. Grab this dude, thrown him in the back. He's handcuffed. He's doing the whole, she'll be right. Remember how I said in Australia you have to cover the person that's in custody? It's like a duty of care type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no dramas.
No, well.
He's done the whole, anyway, I'll just get some details. His mate has jumped in the front seat, driven off with it.
Oh.
Driven off with the car. So that tells me that the keys are in the car. He's just gone, because it's an old school, I think, Falcon back then.
Yeah.
And he's just gone, thanks for coming, and off they go. And the way they had to do that was via telephone. They had to coordinate via telephone because you got to get a radio. So if you've got a radio, you can listen in. So by phone, And so they found it. They actually found it, I think, later on that night.
Yeah. That's untidy.
And so that's what's called, they're federal agents, and what do they call themselves? National? I think they call them national. They're from AFP National or something. I don't know. But I think that society, Australian society or Western society, is at a point now where even the AFP are starting to see dangerous situations. I mean, you can no longer sort of go, oh, they're all just photocopiers. I think now
it's escalated.
Progressively, they've become more street smart. They've had to get more proficient because of the technology. The volume of crime is greater. I think they now play, you know, you could sort of kind of call them real police officers now. I'm probably not going to win any votes from them, but I don't really care. I don't need their votes. But I think I wouldn't call them plastics, but I wouldn't say that they would have the street smarts of a Melbourne or Sydney CBT GD's copper. You know, they're sort of in between. So I never had much to do with them, but what I did, they were very judgmental, very you're below me. When I joined, I didn't have a degree, so therefore I was below them because I didn't have a degree. And also, I grew up with my grandparents. I'd spent some time in a refuge with my mother. They didn't like that. They didn't like the way I spoke. My nickname was Dumb and Dumber, believe it or not. And I now have a degree in policing. I have a postgraduate degree in psychology. I have honours in psychology, and I'm now doing masters. So that's kind of driven me, you know,
But
that's just
still,
the way up. Very fucking strange.
Yeah, but also just fucking shithouse. Like to look down at someone because of some kind of either like trauma or misfortune that they literally have zero control over in their childhood, and then like you use that and weaponize that against them is fucking awful.
Well, that's common. That's just the way they are. It probably still exists to this day. It's a very, very left-leaning organisation, I guess. There's crime. Criminals don't care, you know. They don't really give a fuck about whether someone's believes in global warming or not, you know. They just care about getting away with it, you know, and they just see all the police, regardless of political ideology, as being the enemy. And so if you're not geared up for that, then you're going to suffer. And the AFB have an interesting, they have a very interesting discipline system where it's balance of probabilities. Yeah, they can kick people out on a balance of probabilities. It's very. I received a letter in 2010 after I left, and it just said on the balance of probabilities this occurred, even though you haven't been asked to provide your side of the story. Yeah, that's the way it is. Very. I can send it to you. Very interesting. My wife watches this. She'll probably have a go at me saying I should have been much more polite. But like I said before, I'm pretty honest. So, and you don't have to like me. You just have to listen, really. And that's the way it is. That's just the hard and the fast. And that's why their headquarters has had more than one person die by suicide in their headquarters, and they use their Glock appointment or their firearm.
I was just thinking that. I feel like there was at least one in like the last, but there was like one in like at least the last 2 years maybe.
Yeah, the Edmund Barton building. I'm pretty sure it's a protected building in the sense that you can't do much to it because it's like 100 years old or something. But that's just the way they are. They'll be like, we don't like you, so therefore we're justified in treating you that way. It's incredible.
That's horrendous. And I mean, like, I guess like anyone who has worked in emergency services, first responder roles, like there is a certain, you know, there's that natural level of like shit giving and stirring, but that it comes from a good place. It's like it bonds you, whereas that just sounds toxic as fuck.
Yeah, it is. But for them, they don't know any other way. It's they're just like, well, so what? I'm so much better than you. I'm amazing. It's just an incredible. I used to drink a lot, so here's probably plays into the mental health space. Is I'd go to the ATM, get money out, and I'd look at my receipt, and the money left, which is I think traditionally about $301, and I look and go, that's how much I have for alcohol. So I'd take money out for bills, and everything else would go on alcohol.
Yeah.
And so I would drink to escape the realities of the police and then also the realities of the people I was associating with.
Yeah.
And the thing was when I was drinking, I was making friends. So it's probably the alcohol plus the friendship, that I would make. I probably remember half of them. But
yeah.
And then the other thing too was being Australian with Scottish background, I was pretty good at drinking, to be honest. Probably a bit too good. But through my therapy, once I left the AFB, my drinking stopped.
Okay.
It actually really stopped.
Yeah.
And I did CBT. And I think with CBT, for anyone who's done it, you're probably going to have to cry. And one of the sayings I have is that the more you cry, the less you drink. So I would cry a lot. And then I would be okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I think as well, like many of us, and I know when I was in the job, like most of us engage in those, for want of a better term, like maladaptive coping mechanisms. Like you're saying, part of it was like who you had to associate with and that toxic culture. And for other people, it's just learning to deal with like the trauma that they're exposed to, or anything, whether it's like about their personal life or their professional life. Like I think, and I wouldn't say Australians are necessarily different, but I feel like we have a very unique drinking culture in our country, which can very easily bleed into those domains. And it's how we socialize. And then it's very easy for people to, like you're saying, go push it past the point of like that socializing. And blowing off some steam, shitty call, let's have a couple of beers and we'll be fine. And then it really goes down that path of like, this is not serving me anymore, and it's actually getting dangerous.
Yeah, I think that alcohol flows as a natural part of getting together in Australia. I think that it's unnatural to get together and just hang out for 2 hours without alcohol. But I think we're a sporting nation that gets together at the cricket, or we used to get together at cricket, and then rugby league or soccer or whatever. And then with that comes alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of goes in with our boisterous nature when we're in group settings as opposed to by ourselves, I think.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is we're pretty much, we don't really like to accept other people's feelings in Australia. It's not part of our culture. I don't know how well success is accepted in Australian culture, unlike America, where someone's doing well, like, good on you. Whereas in Australia, it's like, yeah, so what,
Well, we have that tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at the RS trial, Ben Roberts-Smith trial. You're a terrorist one day, you're a farmer the next, whatever. The guy's dead. So do you really give a fuck? But people do, and the people who cared weren't the people over in Afghanistan. They were the ones back in Australia in their urban-centred bloody CBD areas, drinking chai lattes before 10 a.m. They're not doing the hard yards with a special ops rotation in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I mean, I rescued a 12-year-old off the top of a 2-story roof, and he was cutting himself. And I was like, what the fuck? And I grabbed him. And he was falling over, and I grabbed him, and it was raining. I had my Altamas on again, which they're slippery on corrugated roof, and I grabbed him, and I'm like, fuck. And then another guy had grabbed me, and he was what's called lateral, so he was from South Australia Police GDs, and he'd come over. So he had some nous. So he's like, I'm going to go over and help this guy, where the other two just straight AFP people were just standing there. That's standard. And the lateral guy came over and helped. We grabbed this little kid, and then we went back. Someone had told a couple of people back at the station, and it was just a case of, yeah, you saved someone. Yeah, so I've heard. Yep. So what? Like, big deal. That's just the way it is, and then there's criticisms of the veteran community that, well, my service was better than yours. Some people are more commando than others, and I'm of the lower end of the scale. I'm okay with that. I'm quite admittedly the lower end. We don't do a lot of congratulations in Australia, unless it's with alcohol.
Yeah.
It's the way it is. Yeah.
And so at what point then, after the car accident, did you sort of either notice yourself struggling, or did you get to that point of getting a PTSD diagnosis?
That's a really good question. Almost immediately. Disappointingly, I
Okay.
remember originally I was disappointed because I thought that I'd be better or tougher or whatever.
Oh, that's right. You said
Um,
because within the first month you had the acute stress syndrome. Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I
those
remember that.
symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So almost immediately.
Okay.
So the first symptom was not being able to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4:30. The old. I can still hear the music of police rescue. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, um, yeah, and then concentration, and then
okay.
memory loss. Memory
Yeah.
loss was huge, and then the
Mm-hmm.
dreams. So the dreams of cars going into a crowd, which is what they term
Okay.
flashbacks. So if you don't know what that is, that's really you dreaming. They sort of come in dreams or recollections
Mm-hmm.
of the incident, I guess. That's a
Yeah.
flashback. So that was happening quite regularly. Um, yeah, yeah. So then, and then the other thing too is I would say that you could probably gauge how you're doing off how your partner is being affected as well. So
Mm-hmm.
if your partner is sort of very reactive or
Walking around on
worried,
eggshells.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So if they're worried, then you should be too because they're worried about you. Yeah. Um, and then if they're on the phone a lot talking about you, that's another reason to be, like, why are they all of a sudden on the phone a lot? Well, they're worried
Yeah.
about you trying to get advice from whoever they're talking to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
So almost
you,
immediately. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. And so was that like part of your decision making process to go, you know what, I'm fucking done with the AFP? Like,
Before I met Tracy, I went out with a Queanbeyan police officer, and that went horribly. It went really horribly. So part of my Instagram thing is about I do a lot of interpersonal relationships and boundaries create safety and how you
mm-hmm.
deal with other people and really look after yourself as far as a relationship and how you communicate with others
Mm-hmm.
because it went quite badly. And I was having therapy as a result of that relationship. I was actually having therapy to get through that relationship. So I was already seeing a psychologist by the time I went through and saw the psych for the car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, sorry. What was the question again?
That's okay. At what point when you were like, did your diagnosis help cement your decision to leave AFP?
Yeah, you're right. Well, what happened is fucking unbelievably. So I changed my phone number to get it because we kept interacting with this person from Queanbeyan. It kept interacting, and I ended up going to Jim, the welfare guy, who was ex New South Wales. He was the guy talking me out of not going back to work for the car accident. And I
Okay.
changed police stations as well to get away.
Okay.
And I was saying, look, this person is causing dramas.
Yeah.
So this is the dumb thing: is I went, fuck. I'm really not sure who this person is. So I've gone on the police system. Fuck. I've kind of realised. And then complaint was made that I was, usual, I'm being hassled. And then, of course, idiot me, I said, yeah, I looked her up. And the AFP went, mate, can't do that. I go, yep, fair cop. You know what? I was leaving anyway. Which I was. I'd actually applied for the Queensland Queensland Fireys, actually applied for the fire brigade.
Okay.
And then I was stood down on stress leave at the same time that AFP said, hey, mate, we need to have a chat. And then they said, you should go. And I went, all right. And then that was it. So it was a combination of stress leave, me not coping, getting out of a
Yeah.
bad relationship, and the organisation just going, fucking whatever, mate. See ya.
Yeah. So it sounds like
And so,
welfare wasn't really high on their list of priorities, and that
no, they couldn't give a
someone,
fuck.
yeah, and someone who was obviously, like a dedicated member, and not to like excuse what you did, because we all know you can't look up people
Well,
on the police resources
absolutely.
for,
And that's the thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But from like where I'm thinking it's coming from, it's like, but also like all of the after effects from the car accident and your PTSD, like you're saying, like it affected your concentration, it affects your memory, like doing things that are out of character, like from my perspective, all plays into that kind of thing.
Yeah. First of all, I need to admit that what I did in looking up that person was incorrect. And she'd looked me up as well. We were on the phone and we looked each other up. And then I went, hey, I better go back and have a look. And what I found out later was that was her party trick. So she'd go through a series of relationships. They weren't working out. She would then encourage them to look her up on the system and then make complaints, and then the rest would be history. I don't know how she fucking is still in the job. I don't know if she is or not. I wish she gets the help she needs. I hope that she's successful, no further bad relationships, and that's it. You know, I don't even want to mention her name.
Yeah.
That's it, you know. And I did the wrong thing, you know, and that's one thing that I think helped my recovery, was to be brutally honest. One, wasn't much good at commandos. Two, I don't like being called dumb and dumber, so now I've got fucking heaps of degrees. Three, I got through my trauma, and four, I did the wrong thing. I made a mistake in a relationship, so now I try and help others, and that's probably why I'm going to be a good psych, to not make those mistakes. I've made mistakes so that others in the generations below me don't have to make them. And that's because a role model is a title that is earned, not given. So that's what I hope to be, as a role model for others. And I left the AFP probably sooner than I'd hoped, but my life has got better afterwards. You know, the culture is not very conducive to good mental health. And so I'm, you know, and the more you cry, less to drink. And I done a fair bit of that, and now I don't associate with people who I just don't like anymore. You know? So that's just the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like you're in a much better place now. So moving forward, so you left AFP and you said that you applied to join the Fireys in Queensland. So what prompted like that move to Queensland, and what did you end up doing when you were up there?
Tracy is from Queensland.
Okay.
And that's why we settled on the sunny coast. She's got all the family here. We ended up, I was so bad mentally that I couldn't hold down a job. So that's why I joined the reserves. I was already in the reserves anyway, and I took time off, and I just walked into the local reserve unit, and they took me in.
Okay.
And I couldn't get a job. I did a lot of therapy. So the culture in the AFP is such that I actually walked into a psychologist and I said, I think I've got schizophrenia. And the psychologist was like, oh, okay, well, talk me about that. Because what I had experienced compared to what I was being told by the AFP, it wasn't gelling. So when I told you before about going through FOI for that car accident and being told there's no record, that's the sort of shit where, you know, I was like, oh, fuck. So I worked out that therapy really does sort of straighten you out. It got me better. And I joined the army because I wanted to trade. And so I got a trade, fitter and turner, fitter armour. And then I had another breakdown in 2016. It was pretty bad. And then once you get diagnosed with any mental illness in the Australian Army, that's it. Your career's over. Your career's over, mate. You're not going anywhere.
So can I ask, were they like aware of your diagnosis before you joined?
Don't know. Not sure.
That's not something that you had to go through?
Yeah, they were like, well, what you went through is not attributable to us. It's Canberra. It's not really a police force. The AFP is a bunch of plastics. We don't really care. Mate, we reckon you're just fucking making up your mental health issues. We don't believe you. You're now an issue. So fucking feel free to just leave. And so in the end, I put in my discharge. And, I think I still have my uniforms, all my IDs. I handed back my equipment, but I've still got. Still had my army ID, and up until it expired, I could still get on base. Like, that's how little they really cared, and I think that's common, unfortunately. So these days, the army has changed a lot. So when I first joined, the soldier was the highest priority. No longer like that anymore. But that's not sustainable. In peacetime, it's sustainable, but as soon as it becomes warlike again, that will change.
Yeah.
Yeah, so once you get a diet in mental health, that's it. You're fucked. You get medically downgraded and it's game over. And so that's what happened. By 13th of December 2019 was my last actual day at work. Okay. And then I left not longer after that. Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
And I woke up one day and I just wasn't in the army anymore. That was it. That was literally it. Yeah.
I mean, and that's I can imagine sort of like as someone who's had like such like an identifiable role for, even though they've been different roles pretty much throughout like your whole career, and then, you know, on top of that, dealing with some like mental health challenges, like what was that like for you to sort of, I guess, you know, lose that sense of identity?
It's pretty bad. So yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. It's loss of identity for those people who aren't sure why they're feeling the way they are feeling. Mm-hmm. It's their loss of identity. That's how it's termed. So that was a pretty big deal for me. But I ended up joining DRA, Disaster Relief Australia, and I went around up and down the East Coast with them for a bit in between studying. Really, that's pretty good. Yeah.
And so are they like full of veterans, or what's the
they're a veteran focused organisation. So they'll recite the ode every afternoon at 5 o'clock. You know, so an Australian flag goes up and stuff. So they're very veteran focused. We do get a lot of emergency service dudes as well. But yeah, disaster recovery organisation, so helping out. And often DRA are the only ones around. There's no one else. So even up in Wudjil, which is far north Queensland, there was really only us around. Coraki was another one. Went to Auckland, went to New Zealand. Really friendly people. Basically, New Zealand is like Australia 20 years ago, really. I really liked it. I was kind of felt sort of sad to see the changes that Australia's made. New Zealand, I think, has a better culture there. They were very welcoming. It was a shame what happened there. We stayed at Waitakere Fire Station, which is just above Auckland there. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so basically you guys just, if there is any kind of natural disaster like flooding, cyclone, I don't know if you guys help out with bushfires and stuff too, and you're just there to then go and help like the local population recover or stuff like that? Like what role do you guys?
I've been caught in a couple of, when I was in Auckland, we got caught in Cyclone Gabrielle, so we helped prepare there. We actually helped out as it was coming. And they've got a bit of a Korean population there. And I learned to speak a little bit of Korean from the K-dramas and a couple of Koreans. I spoke with my Australian accent Korean. It was the best I could do. And they sort of looked at me and said, "Who the fuck is this guy?" And we worked out why they walked off so quick, because they were stealing stuff. As we went around to say, "Hey, mate, you got to fucking go." But yeah, we're doing like sandbagging and stuff like that to prepare people. We were stuck, the cyclone there in Auckland. Coraki was pretty bad as well. Coraki was probably the most third world I've ever seen, like even PNG, Honiara, even Nepal. I was in Nepal just as a tourist many years ago. And Coraki was by far third world. I can send you some photos. I think I've got some on my Instagram. But fuck, yeah. But the issue with that is it reminds people of the trauma that they
may have already experienced. Yeah.
So you have people who. So I deploy as the wellbeing, so the counselling guy. And so people really struggle. And so we sort of counsel them through stuff, and then the community as well.
Yeah.
It's quite a good role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's something that's really given you maybe like a sense of community that you were missing in your AFP role, and also like a sense of purpose, because, you know, from every role that you have performed for the last, like, I don't know, 20, 30 years, I don't know how old you are, like it's your whole life has been about dedicated to service, like, and just in like a varied capacity, but it's always about, you know, seemingly wanting to help people and do the best in the way that you can.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. I joined the fire brigade, like the volunteer fire brigade at 17, because my grandfather was a fire. He was the captain, and then as soon as I joined, he resigned. But yeah, I guess I'm 47 now. I'll be 48 in June. So I guess 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as I get older, sort of more wiser, I think. Yeah. And then as you get older, with more experience, you learn to cope better with situations.
Yeah.
It's no longer the first time, really.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, okay, I'm familiar with this.
Yeah. And talk to me about studying. So where did the idea or concept of you going down the path to getting like a psychology degree? Oh, actually, so sorry, you said that you had one in policing first, and then you did like a crossover.
So
was that right?
I had a policing degree. After I left the AFP, I went and finished it.
Okay.
Through Charles Sturt Uni, and then a bachelor degree. And then I had another, I guess, breakdown in 2016, and I went and saw a psychologist, and she was really very proficient, very, very, very good psych. And I pretty much thought to myself, you know what, this shit works, you know. So, and I knew that my career in the army wasn't going anywhere, and they weren't really hiding it. And you know, I didn't agree, but I had to accept it. And that's the way it is. I don't agree. I accept it. Okay, I wish you all the best. I'll go on and you do your thing, I do mine. And I did a graduate diploma in psychology, and then I got into honours. Yeah. I did honours. And the thing about psychology is in Australia, you do 4 years and you've pretty much just got an arts degree. The only thing you've got at the end of 4 years is a lot of questions, because you don't really know how to provide therapy. So now I'm learning how to do clinical therapy, because I'm doing practical at the moment. So that's 2 days a week at the uni clinic down in Melbourne. I do it for telehealth.
Okay,
And so that's how that came about. And then people kept telling me, you know, you'll be really good at this. So I guess I started to believe them. And then with DRA, it's a sort of a counselling role there. So I have the ability to pass on lived experience to others, and for them to understand that lived experience, I think is the best way to say it.
No.
I think I'm straight to the point and relatable, I guess. And it's taken longer than I'd hoped. It's 6 years in Australia. I don't know how long it is in America, but it's quite a long time.
Well, I'm actually studying in Australia. Like, I'm studying with an Australian university. Yeah.
Oh, what are you studying?
Psychology.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What year are you in?
Oh, like early. Like I'm about to finish like my 4th class or something like that. So I'm just doing one class at a time at the moment, and then come July. No, I've got one class for the rest of this year, and then come next year, I'm switching universities I'm doing kind of like a couple of different bits and pieces as I like work my way up. So it's a diploma of counselling I'm getting next, which is sort of half psych, half counselling subjects, and then signing on to the Bachelor of Psychological Sciences after that. So then I'll have all the recognised prior learning for all of the ones that I'm doing at the moment. So,
oh, that's very good.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that mean you'll practice here in America? Have you thought about that far?
Yeah, that's a good question. It sort of depends on probably more like my hubby and when he's sort of looking at retiring. So he's a firefighter over here, has been for 20 22 years or something like that. He's a bit older than me, so he'll be looking at retiring. So we're kind of hoping there's like a sweet spot between like him retiring and me finishing my studies, like being able to,
let's hope it
you
works
know,
out. Yeah, that's it.
yeah. So pretty much depending on like where we plan to be at that stage will be like where I figure out whether to do my master's here or there. So we'll see how we go.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Okay. Well, let's hope it works out, mate. After this, we'll stay in contact, and I can pass on any of info and stuff that I've got. I've got
I appreciate that.
I've actually got the electronic DSM-5 TR. I can email you.
Oh,
anyway.
Sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I refer to the DSM-5, you know what I'm crapping on about.
I do. I understand a lot of the stuff. Just, you know, maybe not at like the highest level as you do.
That's all right. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's great news. So that's something you got to look forward to. That's really good. It's a good job.
I love it. So sort of, what I do like now is like life and wellness coaching for first responders, and that's something that, you know, brings me a lot of joy. And then that's kind of, I want to broaden the scope of how I help people. So my end goal is to be either a psychologist in Australia or a therapist over here, specializing in treating sort of trauma and first responders and emergency services workers.
Wow. Okay.
That's the end goal. So thanks.
Yeah. This sort of thing helps out though, because it gets you it gets you used to speaking to people, and it gets you used to accepting their responses, because you can't control people's responses. No. So as you get on further in psychology, this is the sort of thing that will happen, and you'll have to respond to what they say.
Yeah.
So
very much so.
Good. Yeah.
And it's just, you know, I think there's something to be said for studying later on in life. Like, you know, I besides like the policing education I got, I sort of didn't go to uni. I just kind of worked and joined the coppers when I was like 21 or 22. But to have such interest and such passion and know what your end goal is, I think it's such a motivating factor and gives you such drive for learning all of the knowledge and just kind of getting through. You know, it's like I'm you know, turning 40 in a couple of months, so it's weird to be
young. You're
like
only young.
So it's I don't know, I guess it's kind of feels a bit weird to like be, you know, starting university stuff now, but I kind of just go, nah, this is fucking awesome. Like, I know what I want to do with that second part of my life after I've, you know, had a career as a cop and then, you know, spent the last 10 years having kids and all that kind of stuff. And now this decade's for me. So I think it's good.
Nice. That's good. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Nice.
Sorry, we went off a little bit of a tangent there.
That's okay. That's fine.
But what was I going to say? So when you, like, I know you're sort of doing some of like the clinical work now, when you are like a qualified and registered psychologist, is there any particular demographic? Like, are you kind of, I guess, going to present yourself in a way that like you want to work with veterans or emergency services members, or are you kind of just going to be like, whatever comes my way, I'm happy to help?
That's a good question. And it's one that needs to be asked and answered. At the moment, I work with kids, well, adolescents at the moment, which I don't mind. And the thing with adolescents is you form a rapport with the parents as well. Yeah. You just got to control when the parents answer for the adolescent. You know, you ask, "Hey, Johnny," and then Jane steps up. You're like, "No, hang on, let Johnny answer." Yeah. There's a bit of a rapport there, but what you do if you're ever going to, and you don't have to really give anyone a diagnosis, but if you are going to diagnose, you do take in the parents and the teachers as well as the child's sort of evidence, I guess. So working at the moment with ADHD and ASD people really presents challenges. But veterans, kind of a bit embarrassed that I didn't do any warlike service, but from a psych perspective, it's okay because I won't really have any reactions to it. But but I feel that probably emergency services is probably better, really. I think that's probably where I'd like to go. But really, you can't really, you don't really choose where your patients or clients come from. They just come to you, and then, you can refer them on, but you'd have to have a good reason. So in an area like to specialise, or mainly, would probably be emergency services workers, because you can relate. And the thing that I can relate to is one, the incidents, and two, the recovery. So I would know what works and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that would be
relaying
so beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah, and then relaying it sort of in terms that they would understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. That makes sense. And so I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, and if you're not, that's okay. But I guess, where are you in terms of your recovery? Because I think, and maybe this is actually something that you can really, really speak to, and for a lot of the people listening are generally in that first responder realm, maybe with some kind of military experience, and I think that, like, there's a lot of fear, and a lot of people are scared of getting, like, a quote unquote diagnosis, and then, like, they don't know what that looks like moving forward for them in their life, moving forward for them in their career, like, and I think maybe sometimes they can be sensing that something's not right, that they're a little bit off kilter, that, they're responding to things in a way that they wouldn't normally. They're maybe not coping as well, or someone's mentioned something to them, but simply because of getting, like, that DSM-5 diagnosis or anything like that, like, that the fear is stopping them from reaching out and, like, getting some kind of assistance from a mental health clinician. Like, are you able to sort of talk about that?
The diagnosis serves for two purposes. One is it allows you to formulate a treatment plan, and it gives treatment. So, for example, PTSD, CBT, borderline personality is more DBT. Mm-hmm. Anxiety, you would be looking at some other therapy, maybe. It can be CBT as well. So the diagnosis allows you to formulate a treatment. Mm-hmm. And also, the other thing too is allows a person to understand, okay, so this might be what they would call what's wrong with them. And then the other thing too is you've got to understand is through the police or the army or defence force or whatever, the diagnosis allows insurance companies to pay for your treatment. That's why it happens with, say, Comcare or DVA or the American system.
Like Veterans Affairs,
The reason why I have acute stress disorder was because under the American system, when people had car accidents, they were having stress for about 30 days, and then they were on their way. They were fine. And so they needed insurance companies to pay for their therapy or whatever for that time. So they turned around and said, we'll call it acute stress disorder. So that's an example of where insurance companies influence a diagnosis. And that's in the DSM-5 now. It's in the stress-related disorders. So a diagnosis gives, one, it gives both the patient and the therapist an avenue to, well, this is the treatment you're going to get. Mm-hmm. And also it opens up for payment for people to have, but it also provides a label. So if someone gives you PTSD, you're like, okay, cool, I'm just like everybody else. If someone gives you schizophrenia, people could freak out and be like, fuck, now I'm going to get labeled massively. Yeah. So you've got to be careful with the diagnosis. The diagnosis doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. You wouldn't mistreat someone because they've got a broken leg. So you shouldn't really mistreat someone because they've got generalized anxiety disorder or whatever it is. So it just enables things to flow. And then on your report, you'll read that, it'll say the diagnosis, because the insurance company, whoever it is, government or private, will want to know so that they can provide money for that, and then from there the treatment flows on. So there's no point giving someone cognitive behavioral therapy if they don't. There's no behaviours to change. Yeah. So so that's what the diagnosis is, and it's not really having a go at anyone. It's not really. I mean, people can perceive it as a label, but it's not nothing against them. It's not their fault. That's the way humans are, and that's unfortunately how life rolls. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess like you also know it from both perspectives, like in terms of like, I know you might not necessarily be at the stage where you will be providing someone a diagnosis, but as in having also been on the receiving end of that treatment and of receiving a diagnosis, like how did that sort of like affect you?
Diagnosis in the police and the army, at least in Australia, is pretty much a death sentence. I'm not going to lie. So it can be bad. It allows for treatment, but you get diagnosed with anything in the army, mental health wise, mate, you might be able to get through it. You might get lucky, and I hope you do. But the majority of people, you're getting medically discharged, and some people really push for that. But you know, it shouldn't be seen as that. It's not your fault. It's how you've responded. And to be honest with you, if you don't respond to that sort of trauma, then you'd be looking at some sort of disassociation, really, which is really serious. Your antisocial personality disorder, where you can inflict pain on others and it's fine. You're fine. Like, that's a fucking big deal, you know. So it's okay. It's okay because it's not final. The diagnosis is not final, and that's not your final resting place.
Yeah.
That's, you know, so
can you, and if you're comfortable sharing, like you're saying that like, diagnosis isn't final. And I think that's part of like that labeling thing. Like I have a therapist friend, Maggie, and she works with first responders, and what she likes to tell her clients is that she wants to get you to a point where, what is the language she says? Basically, so it's like you don't have like an active diagnosis, or you basically get to a point in your recovery where you might not necessarily be like 100%, but you might not necessarily meet the criteria anymore.
Yeah. They can't really undiagnose you. Once you get a diagnosis, it's kind of final. What's called a lifetime illness, but there are ones that aren't lifetime illnesses. And so 2 examples of that is adjustment disorder, and the other one is acute stress disorder. So they're like adjustment disorder, the symptoms resolve itself after 6 months of whatever you're adjusting from has finished, and acute stress is the symptoms are over in 30 days. But a lifetime illness is like PTSD, generalized anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, ASD, ADHD, that's kind of. Now, whether you're still going to have the same symptom severity as when you've been diagnosed is we don't know. But the symptoms will always be there. Statistically, symptoms will always be there, just at varying levels. So when you get diagnosed, you're up here, and then after a while, the idea is to reduce the symptom severity and increase your impairment, increase your functioning. So functioning higher, impairment lower. With the lower the symptoms, the lower the impairment, and then the higher the function. So that's the idea. And you don't really need to be free of the diagnosis. You just need to do the best you can with the tools you've got, and then you're looking at increasing your functioning anyway, or what's called pre-morbid settings. Pre-morbid is another word for prior to whatever the fuck's happened to you, going back to the standard.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't heard it like that before. That's good.
Well, I often say to people, especially juveniles, think of trauma as something in an action movie that has happened where you go, fuck, that's violent. And so you relate it back to an action movie where you think, fuck, that's violent, you know what I mean? So I never understood how the dude out of Hawaii 5-0 was portrayed, because he had a near-death experience every episode, and Steve McGarrett would just bounce back like it was nothing, you know? Incredible. But just think of it like that.
That's fair enough. And so I guess probably just like the one thing that I also wanted to ask is that, and, you know, we're going back like 30 years, but was there anything ever mentioned at the inception of either you joining the reserve, you joining like the regular army, joining any of like the law enforcement roles you did, like was, and I think we've spoken probably enough about how shit the AFP might have been about it, but was anything ever mentioned in regards to like mental health or being able to maintain it or being proactive about it or anything like that at all in any of those positions?
When I first joined the army, there was no such thing as depression or anxiety. There's fucking nothing. You did see Vietnam vets one day and they were gone the next, and the way that was termed was, "Oh, he wigged out. We wigged out," and that was it. Okay. You're like, "Oh, fuck, okay." That was it. The AFP did have a welfare officer, and they did have what's called Davison Trahair, and they're a contracted organisation. And you get three sessions with them. But 3 sessions isn't much, and that was their way of saying, "Well, we give you 3 sessions, fucking sort it out yourself." They'll say, "Look, we're family friendly and blah blah," but it's very much, do we like this person's character? Is this person related to anyone in the AFP that holds rank? So therefore, we'll keep them. It's very character based. So if you don't like someone, then you're out. So because remember, the way they think is, the public wakes up and first of all thinks about the AFP. That's their genuine fucking weirdos. And it's all about sending a greatly worded email. That's the biggest thing you'll do. It's fucking incredible. So they're not really interested. They'll say they are, but when I was there, they weren't anyway. But they have to say that because that's the way it is. Whether they are or not, I can tell you now. I would probably suggest not. But there wasn't a massive deal on mental health at all. No, on mindfulness or well-being. No, nothing like that.
And so you, I can't remember whether we've actually discussed it on here or you shared it with me offline, like you're in your final semester before you get your end of your master's. And so therefore in Australia, then you can apply for, or you're like a provisionally registered, then you will be a generally registered psychologist. Are you planning to go into any kind of like clinical like specialty or area of endorsement
Probably
or anything
general
like that?
Really. I wouldn't mind getting into criminology, but I don't know, like the idea, the psychologist said to me, "What's the point of finding out the motive of or the mental health space of that guy on Saturday at Bondi, because he's dead, he's not going to do it again." So I'd rather deal with people who are alive. I don't really want to go in what's called forensic psych. So when psychs talk about forensic history, they're talking about criminal history. Antecedents. So if someone you see on the TV, forensic history, they're talking about what crimes have they committed beforehand. And so that's what forensic psychs do.
I'm writing a paper on it as we speak.
So I'd rather just do what we're doing now. Because that's what we do every day, and that's what people lack when they do every day is interpersonal communication skills lack. So if you can't get that right, you're going to be impaired, what we call it. So I'd rather just help with that, not get too excited, I guess.
And that's and I guess maybe just like whether it's inclusive of that or outside of that, what I guess do you see as, you know, your purpose moving forward? Like you've had this amazing like opportunities and different, you know, career little pockets along the way that have just really like entailed service. And, you know, you're still sort of seeking to service the community in the ways with the disaster recovery organization and you know, your counseling moving forward. Like, is that sort of what you see for yourself going ahead? Is there anything else that you really want to focus on too?
I don't mind it. Kind of dream job would be I guess, a psych within an emergency service organisation, and then providing sort of counselling services as it happens. I'm more of an as it happens kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like the idea of bouncing in 6 weeks after something's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is, if I was going to be dead, I'd be dead by now. So I'm happy to take the risk and attend stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think really working with emergency services, whether in the organisation or as a counsellor, psych, would be where I'd want to be.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of money in doing children sort of cognitive assessments. Apparently, there's like $2,000 each. Money has a value. It doesn't really mean that much to me. So that sort of side of psychology, I'm not really that interested in. But I think just helping people get through their daily lives after they've tried to help someone else get through their daily lives is pretty much where I'd like to be. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that for you. And it also kind of sounds like, I don't know whether it's more of a buzz term over here than it is back home, but have you heard of like the CISM, the critical incident stress management? I don't know if they sort of do that in Oz. You haven't heard of it?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay.
No.
I'll talk to you about it a little bit offline. It's sort of something that's like sort of big over here, and it's almost like a little more like kind of peer support based, but they have kind of like you're saying, something happens, critical incident of, a certain sort of category, and it's like a team rollout, and they have everyone who is sort of, first on scene and really involved in the job. And there's a couple of different sort of ways that they can do it, but it's almost like having like a bit of like a debrief. And there's like the evidence showing that like getting people to talk about it within that sort of 24-hour period or that 72-hour period, and there's normally a clinician and, some peers and all that kind of thing, it helps. It's like almost like, preventative and proactive in terms of getting them to talk about it early and speak up about their experience early can sort of help prevent it. So I'll see if I can send you some stuff about it, because I did a course over here, and I have to do like another course to be able to join a team, but it's really, really interesting.
Okay. Yeah, nice. Cool.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But what was I going to say? The other thing I wanted to share as well is that, like I mentioned at the start, Josh and I met on Instagram. And do you want to tell everyone about like your handle and sort of the kind of things that you share, and I guess maybe like the message that you're trying to share, or like on that platform that can reach, anyone who's interested?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So my Instagram page is, I did change it. The Everyday Prov Psych. And what I do there is try and share messages about everyday things that people can do to assist their recovery. So I should stress that Instagram is not therapy, but it is a tool that I try and use to get a basic message out that people can understand, and usually around interpersonal communication, mental suicidality, which is a really complex issue. There's a couple of ones where I try to make it kind of amusing. There's a couple of ones where I try and have a conversation basically with myself, but also with people. But it's a mental health focused, psych focused sort of Instagram page that try to connect with people from an everyday situation. And it's interesting, you trying to make it as simple as possible, but passing on a message that they can relate to about their mental health. Well, and also teaching, really trying to teach people or give them tools that they can use to help themselves become better, I guess, or just give them knowledge. And the other thing I try and do, which I haven't really done much of lately, is try and help or encourage people to help their friends to reach out with their friends. Because the two things about suicide, if you've ever been to a funeral where a person's died by suicide, is you're asking two questions. One is, why didn't I ever pick that? was going to happen, and two, why did he do it? I didn't know, and then why did he do it? So to stop yourself asking why, you need to have good conversations with people beforehand. And there are going to be instances where, where people say, "Hey, I did everything I could," you know.
Yeah.
But that's what I try and do with my Instagram handle. Is just trying to educate people, really. And I think the other day I put up my a couple of photos and qualifications on there because recently there's been some people who have falsified or embellished their service, or they've taken money for charities that they don't have qualifications to do. So just to be honest with people, I put that up. But it's kind of a side gig I do because uni takes up a lot. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. No, that makes sense. And I'll say that one of my favorites that you put up that resonated with me was last Christmas when you put up the Die Hard one, and it was like, there are two types of people in this world: the ones who think Die Hard is a Christmas movie, and those who are wrong. And it resonated. Well, it resonated with me because I have an older brother, and him and I always like have a giggle about Die Hard being a Christmas movie, and we'll send each other like things saying Merry Christmas. It's normally got that picture of Bruce Willis with his like the lighter or whatever it is.
Yeah, inside the vent. Yeah.
Yeah. So
they made that in 11 days, I think, that movie. They actually made it inside Fox Studios, and where the construction is actually a real construction zone.
Oh,
so the reason why it's all made at night time was because they didn't have the money to borrow a studio. So they made it all night time. It's very rarely during the day. So they did it on weekends at night time. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Learn something new every day.
They didn't realise it was going to be such a big deal. And so the truck at the start has has the blokes walk out. And at the end, it has the ambulance coming out. That's because they were making it up as they went along, because they had 35 pages or something, and then they just went along and made it up because they weren't sure. And then the people speaking German aren't really speaking fluent German because they didn't think that the Germans would ever watch it because it's an American show. But I mean, I am actually doing my final research report on does action movies with a Christmas theme together with expressive arts therapy reduce depression severity. And so watching Die Hard 1 and 2, Rambo, I think there was 8 movies with Christmas themes in it. Lethal Weapon 1, Prometheus, The Last Action Hero, there's a couple others. And so the supervisor wrote back and goes, "You're in danger of failing this assignment because there's no evidence to suggest that Christmas movies with action themes actually reduce fucking severity." So I'm going to have to change it. But anyone listening to this would probably realise that watching those movies you can relate to. And there's kind of a genre where action movies are Christmas movies, because Christmas movies traditionally are, you feel good, snow, that sort of stuff. Whereas Die Hard's quite the opposite of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a lot about escapism too, just to be able to sit back.
Film immersion, escapism, and then reciting part of the play, giving you because it's about the good guys beating the bad guys.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it. And the good guys always win, and that's what you're doing in the police, that's what you're doing in the army. So they're reciting that, and then it gives them that they can relate to that. They know what they're going to watch. They know how it's going to end. And then when they recite that play in expressive arts therapy, there is evidence to suggest that depression severity actually reduces.
We'll see. Maybe there's a slight pivot you can make.
There will be. I'll be making that pivot. I'll be like, oh, yeah. Anyway.
No, but it makes me laugh because my hubby's like that. Like, we don't watch like a hell of a lot of stuff together because we have different tastes, but generally anything like war related we watch together, like Generation Kill, Band of Brothers, anything like We Hate Hitler, documentaries, we always watch like stuff like that. But if, we're watching some kind of like normal movie, and he gets so fucking pissy if like the ending shit and it is like the bad guys win, or it's like left, you know, really ambiguous and unresolved, and he's just like, why the fuck would they do that? So when it's like, you know, good guys win, even if it's a little bit fucked up and it's like a clean cut ending, he's like, see, how hard was that? Like every single time I could like set a timer on my watch for like him to just like quote that at the end of every film. So I think you're right. There's something about the escapism, but that everything in the world seems fine though at the end.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's part of the, yeah, you're right, part of the background to it. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's an iconic movie. But yeah, I think it was made in 11 days, yeah. And it came out and they made heaps of money. Bruce Willis was, in that movie, the highest paid actor in the world at the time. He got paid $5 million.
Wow.
Yeah. So he just came off moonlighting, I think. And they took a gamble. He did his own stunts. So he did his own stunts with the hose coming out of the window. And he said, no, I have to do my own stunts because I want to be taken seriously. So he did that. And yeah.
Well, because that was also back in a time, I think, when there was such like a division between television actors and movie actors, and people sort of making that jump and being taken seriously.
Moving from the small screen to the big screen, you know you'd made it then. Yeah. Pretty much
now it's almost like the opposite. Now it's like movie actors go and do like the really good TV shows.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
For having a chat about everything. I like to normally finish the podcast off with asking our guests 2 questions.
Yeah, please.
So, the name of the podcast is I'll Hold Space for Your Darkness. And it's about, you know, I think the point of this is people have the opportunity to share their stories and experiences, and knowing that there's a place where you actually can come and do that, and also knowing that, you know, whatever you've experienced, you're not alone in that, and there are other people who can commiserate and understand and are willing to you know, listen to you offload a little bit. So the first question I like to ask is, what do you do to hold space for your darkness?
At the moment, I'm okay, but at the time, I wrote a diary, and it was called The Honesty Book. And so I wrote everything from how many chin-ups I did, which at the time might have been 2, and I think I got to 6. I wrote my goals, when I achieved them. I wrote my failures. I didn't write down what I ate, but I wrote my failures, my improvements, all in this book, and I've still got it to this day. And then I had a date where I would definitively finish it off. So I had a goal when I'd finish off this book, and then I've still got it, but I wrote everything. So how many push-ups I did, chin-ups, courses I went on with the army, stuff I talked about with my psychiatrist, all that sort of shit. And then communicating with my wife. Therapy was a big deal. And then with that, for me, ended up being a lot of physical injuries as well. So I had to see the physio and stuff.
Yeah.
Sleep's a big deal. Yeah, that's pretty much. But I think acceptance as well. One, it's not your fault. And then acceptance that at that time you're not feeling very well, but it's not always going to be that way. So you need to accept that your goals, because your values and goals are aligned. So your goals won't be achieved because you won't be mentally healthy enough to do that, but you have to accept that, and then accept that you will get there, and then accept that your poor mental health, you've gotten better. So that part of you is no longer part of you. Then you move on in an attempt really to try and not be that unhealthy again, I guess. Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. And the last question I ask is, what can someone do, whether that is a friend, a colleague, a spouse, a partner, anything like that? What can they do to like help support you in terms of you know, holding space for your darkness?
I think acceptance again and non-judgment. Judgment, stigma is not okay. And then respect. So I've got a friend, I said, I'll come down and visit you for Anzac Day. And he goes, mate, I'm trying to get to 2% body fat. So I was like, all right, no point going out on Anzac Day with you. And so it's respect for their goals and what they're trying to achieve, not trying to intrude upon their personal space, and then allow them to set the pace of their journey, really.
Yeah.
And then be there for them. But you got to know when to enter a conversation and then know when to leave. So you've got to know how much to give someone and how much, when they say they want to be left alone, then you've got to leave them alone. And when they want interaction, you give them interaction.
Yeah.
But then also other supports such as, a psychologist, your GP can be a support. Your own hobbies can be a support. Sleep hygiene is good. Staying away from alcohol, keeping on your medications, that sort of stuff. So you do the basics first,
Mm-hmm.
And then and I think making people aware, informing them of how you're feeling, and then when you're the person talking to them, have a goal as for what you want out of that conversation, and then listen. But then also look for what's not there as well.
Yeah.
What am I not seeing? What part of the puzzle do I need to find out? And so because you're about helping them out, and that help, everyone's an expert in their own opinion. So how best can you support them? So you're looking at how best you can support someone. And they're the most important person when you're engaging with them. They're the most important person. You're reacting to that. And then providing hope would be the other one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I think, like a delicate balance. And like you're saying, each person's going to be individual in terms of what they need and that give and take and everything like that. So sort of striking that balance and truly listening to what that person actually needs, and in the way that they need you to support them. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
All right,
I hope
awesome.
I answered that well enough.
No,
Yeah.
you did. Yeah, 100%. All right. All right. Yeah. Again, thank you so much for your time, Josh. I really, really appreciate it, and sharing your experiences and your stories and everything like that. Yeah. We'll keep in contact. And everyone jump on Instagram and follow Josh at the Everyday Prov Psych. I will pop his Instagram handle in the show notes. All right. This has been another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, First Responder Mental Health podcast. I've been your host, Erin Jane. Thanks for listening. And as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.